We are spatio-temporal beings. This affirmation sets the limit and the horizon of our human existence. And most importantly, we realize ourselves within time, and our encounter with God also happens within time. Time is therefore ultimately a gift of God. This makes more sense to me today while thinking of the 25 years of my ordination in the congregation with 5 others in Nigeria. For me, it is a privilege and more of God's providence and grace to celebrate this anniversary here in this holy place with all of you in the context of the Congregational Jubilee and the Spiritual Congress. And I want to say thank you for coming for my anniversary from all over the world. Today, the first word I would like to say is thank you to God for the missionary vocation that He has given to me. Let me tell you something about my vocation. Being a missionary was not the primary thing I intended to do. As a young boy, I wanted to be a medical doctor. And I started my studies, but at some point I had to abandon it for missionary vocation. And I remember my father asking me this question: is this what you want to do? And I replied, yes. Then he said to me, why didn't you tell me before now? You made me to pay the full school fees and you started your studies already. I had no answer. The rest is history now. Each of us has his own proper vocation story, which, when put together, contributes to the history of our perspective of our respective religious institutes, since the history of the members defines and from the perspective of spirituality also shapes the congregation. Allow me to say that today we have reflected on our history from the perspective of spirituality. I find an irresistible call to think of a vocation spirituality that is congruent with the gospel we have read. The gospel reading tells us about the history of the 12 who followed Jesus. And today it speaks particularly about the transition from being disciples to becoming apostles. He called them those disciples and he sent them from mathetai to apostoloi. This is a very significant moment in the history and the mission. Our gospel today underscores a call for a missionary or a mission with all the necessary instruments to work effectively in every vocation. We heard in the gospel that he gave them authority, exousia, and he also gave them power. Vocation is God's initiative, and God gratuitously provides everything needed to fulfill this mission. What will this authority and power translate to in our day? What is the need of our day? that we must identify to adequately and effectively use the God-given instruments to address it, this mission will shape our spirituality. The naming of the 12 apostles also reveals that the one who called knows them true and true. When we replace these names with ours, assuming the role that the Lord assigns us, we then realize that He knows us as we are, and we have the privilege to participate in His mission. The mission is to proclaim the nearness of the kingdom of God with some territorial restrictions that the gospel presents to us. Sometimes we might think of these restrictions as limiting and a sort of counter-missionary spirit. However, the Lord always has a reason for whatever He requires of us. Our missionary spirituality, which is also apostolic, places us in the stead of these apostles. This will be an essential aspect of our life that we could reflect upon more intensely during this Congress to better respond to the intrinsic nature of our missionary vocation and the missionary commitment that is consequent upon it. The providence of God accompanied the apostles as Jesus sent them out on their mission. We should keep sight of this providence in our spiritual itinerary. This providence, I must say, has accompanied me during these 25 years as the unexplainable accomplishment of the Lord that manifests itself at various times in the less expected and some difficult and challenging situations in my life. A missionary spirituality that relies purely on divine providence and not on one's ability or capacity or even the plans that one has foreseen. When we recognize our limits, we know that there are the unforeseeable. We need to allow God to act in this space of the unforeseeable. In the spirit of thanksgiving, may I invite us to enter more deeply into this mystery of our vocation and mission as a privilege which calls for responsibility and constant communion with Him in whom we live and move and have our being.